Isang veil ang nakasabit sa isang kawit, puti at manipis, kumikislap sa ilalim ng lampara ng bodega. Sa gitna ng kahon-kahon ng tela at kahanginang mga sapin, si Naomi Haze ay nagtatapos ng kanyang gabi, pinupunasan ng isang tray, inaayos ang mga sintas at pinapakinggan ang huling mga tugtugin na unti-unting nawawala sa malayong ballroom. Kahit napagod, ang bawat kilos niya ay maingat, propesyonal. Ito ang likas niyang sandata. Sa mga mata ng mga kliyente, siya ang taong hindi dapat magkamali. Sa sarili niyang puso, siya ang nagbabayad ng mga tinig ng nakaraan. Nagring ang kanyang telepono, isang numero na hindi niya kilala. Isang larawan ang naka-attach, isang envelope na may selyong lumang estilo, pula, may marka na tila heraldic, walang teksto. Si Naomi ay huminga. Alam niyang hindi random ang mga bagay na ganito sa industriyang kanilang ginagalawan. Kinabukasan, bago pa man sumapit ang tanghali, nagpakita ang Italyano na lalaki sa venue. Hindi siya nag-announce, hindi rin siya nagpakitang tao. Pumasok si Lorenzo Vitale na parang isang bagyong dahan-dahan, maayos ang damit, navy suit na halos hindi kumukupa sa ilaw at may isang presensya na natural na nagmumungkahi ng kapangyarihan. Ang mga taong nag-oorganisa ay nag-abot ng mga palad, tinanong niya ang layout, ang mga suppliers at ang mga contingency plan na halos pareho ang tono ng isang general. Si Naomi ang ipinadala ni Lito, ang head of security, para ipakita ang venue. Hindi niya sinasadyang makipagkita sa Lorenzo noon pa lang. Hindi rin niya inaasahan na ang simpleng pag-inspeksyon ng mga linyang ilaw at florera ay mauuwi sa alok na magbabago ng takbo ng buhay niya. Naomi, mahina ang pagkakabanggit ni Lorenzo, parang sinusukat ang pangalan niya. Sabi ni Lito, ikaw ang pinakamalamig ang ulo sa grupo, kailangan ko ng ganoong uri ng tao. Naglakad silang magkasama sa gitna ng hall, pinaliligiran ng mga sample na bouquet at mannequin draped in muslin. Ang boses ni Lorenzo ay malambing, ngunit may kakaibang estruktura, hindi basta charm, may kalkulasyon. I'm organizing a wedding for the Park family, sabi niya sa Ingles, mahinahon. High profile, international guests. I need discretion and a lot of hands-on arranging during the night. I want someone who can move without making noise, someone who can hold a crisis and not let it spill. Si Naomi ay tumingin sa kanya. Ano ang eksaktong hinihingi ninyo? Tanong niya, profesional. Hindi niya binanggit ang kakaibang larawan sa telepono. Hindi pa oras para bumakas ang sugat. Not only logistics, sagot ni Lorenzo, tumigil sa harap ng isang display ng vintage lace. There is a level of personal attendance I prefer. Someone near the bride at all times, for reasons of privacy, for reasons of assurance. Nagtagal ang katahimikan. Ang rurok ng alok ay hindi layon lamang ng kompetensya, may kasamang implied na paglapit, ang uri na madalas nagiging lubhang mapanlanlang kapag ang kapangyarihan ay nasa iisang kamay. Naomi inhaled, pinakinggan ang tunog ng sarili niyang puso. Ang alok ay malaking sweldo, hindi lang iyon, pagkakataon para patunayan ang sarili. Ngunit kasabay ng oportunidad ay kumalat ang mga alaala. Isang batang Naomi na nagtatakbo palayo, isang estranghero na nagiiwan ng mga pangakong hindi natupad, ang mga tuntunin ng loob na pinilit siyang maging maliit upang makasunod. Hindi siya ang unang tumugon sa ganitong uri ng power play, ngulit hindi rin siya nagsisisi sa trabaho na nagbigay sa kanya ng disiplina. Kung ako'y tatanggap, mahigpit ang tinig niya, may mga kondisyon ako. Walang public association, walang mga larawan na ipapaskil sa social media na nagpapakita na ako'y bahagi ng pribadong seremonya. Ang seguridad ng mga staff ang pangunahing prioridad. Kung may panganib, magre-report ako agad. Hindi ako magpapadala ng ultimatum o gagawa ng kilos na ikapapahamak ng iba. Tiningnan siya ni Lorenzo ng buo. Para sa ikalawang pagkakataon, tila sinusukat niya ang bigat ng kanyang paninindigan. Pagkatapos ay ngumiti siya, hindi matamis, hindi malamig, isang kurba lang ng labi na nagbigay ng posibilidad. Sana nang ganon, sagot niya, at ataguhin kita ng komprehensibong kontrata, pera, proteksyon at legal cover. At isang personal request, gusto kong ikaw ay nasa vicinity ng bride hanggang matapos ang gabi, parang personal assistant pero sa pinakagalikadong bahagi.
Hindi siya humiling ng malinaw na pag-aasawa, hindi iyon ang tono. Ngunit ang alok ay may kakaibang tint, parang hinihingi niya ang presensya ni Naomi sa isang sitwasyon na hindi pangkaraniwan ang stakes. Si Naomi sa isang sulok ng kanyang isipan na pagtanto na ang alok ay mas malalim kesa sa sinasabi. Ito ay paunang hakbang, isang pagkontrol na nakabalot sa practicality. Nag-dinner sila sa isang maliit na table sa kusina ng venue, kung saan ang mga ilaw ay malumanay at may aroma ng olive oil at roasted garlic mula sa trial menu. Si Lorenzo, sa pagkuha ng tinor, hindi agad nagsalita ng masyado tungkol sa ibang mga detalye ng kontrata. Sa halip, tinanong niya ang mga hindi inaasahang bagay tungkol kay Naomi. Hindi personal na usapan sa pinakamababaw na paraan, kundi mga tanong na pumapasok sa loob ng kanyang pagkatao. Paano siya nagiging maayos sa trabaho? Ano ang nagpapalakas sa kanya sa mahahabang gabi at ang maliit na tanong tungkol sa kung sino siya kapag wala ang uniform? May kabuuang kagalakan sa boses ni Naomi habang nagsasalita, mulit malinaw din na may hawak siyang mga boundary. Siya ay hindi basta kusang nagbubukas. Ako ay nagtrabaho para mabuhay, sabi niya sa dahan-dahan. At dahil doon natutunan kong magtrabaho ng maayos, hindi ako nagpapadala ng drama sa kliyente at hindi ako nagiiwan ng mga tanong. Ang pag-uusap ay lumalim sa mga antas na hindi inaasahan ng neutral parties, mga pag-uusap tungkol sa pananagutan, sa mga paraan ng pagkontrol ng isang sitwasyon at sa isinit-isinit pagigin.
Sa isang sandali na tila napakasimple, tumunog ang telepono ni Lorenzo, isang text na tumawid sa screen. Ang tinig niya nang basahin ang message ay hindi umano, mabilis at may lamig. We have a minor threat. Van sighted near the venue. Keep distance, do not panic. Hindi tumindi ang paningin ni Naomi, ngunit naramdaman niya ang pagbagal ng daloy ng hangin. Ang unang pahiwatig ng banta ay nagparating ng mensahe. Ang kasal na kanilang inorganisa ay hindi lamang tungkol sa bulaklak at musika. Ito ay entablado ng reputasyon. At si Naomi, na bahagi ng likod linya, ay biglang napako sa gitna ng isang digmaan na hindi niya pinili pero kailangan niyang harapin. Ito ang sandali para sa unang CTA, hindi ingay ng komersyal, kundi isang tahimik na paanyaya. Kung gusto mong malaman kung bakit tinanggap ni Naomi ang alok na magbabago ng buhay niya, manatili ka at mag-subscribe para hindi mo mamiss ang buong kwento. Tinanggap ni Naomi ang alok, hindi sa kadalian, hindi rin dahil sa pag-ibig sa peligro. Ito ay kalkuladong desisyon, pera, proteksyon na inako ni Lorenzo at ang oportunidad na ipakita na siya ay hindi lamang isang mukha sa likod ng tray. Siya ay isang profesional na may disiplina. Ngunit, bago pa man siya lumabas sa kusina at bumalik sa mga kahon ng tela, may sumulpot na maliit na bagay na nagiiwan ng paklat. Sa rehearsal hall kinabukasan, nagkita si Naomi at si Minji, ang bride. Si Minji ay may paraan ng paglalakad na parang nag-iingat sa bawat hakbang. Mga mata niyang malaki at mahinahon, ngunit may mga anino ng takot kapag napapansin ang mga kamera. Si Mrs. Park, ang matriarch, ay nasa gilid, kontrolado ang ekspresyon. Ang tipikal na babae ng pamilya na may hawak ng maraming impluensya, ngunit may isang tinig na hindi basta nagpapaubaya sa sinuman. Si Naomi, mahinang pag-aanunsyo ni Lito, ang magiging eyes and ears ng gabi. Minji ay ngumiti, parang nawawala sa hangin ng rehearsal. If anyone can keep me calm, it will be you. Naomi tumingin ng diretso sa kanya. Para siyang lakita ng maliit na kuweba sa ilalim ng matigas na hibla ng babae, isang lugar na puno ng pag-aalala. Hindi niya naisip noon na magiging malinaw ang kanyang emosyonal na pagkahawig sa bihirang pagkakataon na ito. Nakakabit ang profesionalismo at ang pagkakaroon ng malalim na empathy. Ang rehearsal ay umikot sa mga detalyeng magprapasya ng daloy ng gabi, seating chart na ginawa para magbigay daan sa dignitaries, offstage route ni Minji, emergency signals. Si Lito ang nangunguna sa security briefing, matigas ngunit realistiko, at ipinaliwanag ang mga division ng team, black van patrol, drone surveillance countermeasures, mga checkpoint sa paligid, at isang maliit na grupo na ilalagay malapit sa bride. Si Lorenzo ay nanood lang mula sa gilid, tahimik na nagmamasid at may mga mata na katuon sa paraan ng paggalaw ni Naomi. Hindi dahil siya ang boss, dahil may interes.
Ang unang tunay na tanda ng banta ay hindi drama. Ito ay diskreto. Isang text na dumating sa phone ni Naomi habang siya ay nag-aayos ng veil sa gilid. Isang larawan ng isang lumang Polaroid, isang batang babae, si Naomi sa isang out-of-place dress, may background na isang dingding na hindi niya makilala. Sa kaliwang sulok, isang selyong pula ang malinaw na ipinakita, walang salita. Ngunit, ang mensahe ay malinaw, may koneksyon ang nakaraan mo sa senaryo namin. Naomi, you okay? Tanong ni Lito, napapansin ang ugali ng dalaga. Okay lang, sagot niya, tinatago ang phone. Hindi niya alam kung sino ang nagpadala o kung ano talaga ang laman ng Polaroid. Ngunit sa puso niya, alam niya na ang isang parte ng kanyang nakaraan ay bumalik para kumatok. Ang security team ay agad na nag-react, hindi nila pinayagan ng ignorance. Tinawag ni Lito si Unji, ang maliit na informant na palaging may alam sa mga panlabas na bagay. Siya ang naglilinis ng rehearsal hall, siya ang may access sa mga basurahan at sa mga delivery slips. Si Unji, na kilala sa pagiging tahimik ngunit mabilis ang kamay, ay nagbigay ng maliit na sulat na nakita niya sa dumpster sa likod ng venue. Isang sobre, walang pangalan, may parehong selyong pulang heraldic. May ilang smudges, parang ginawang sinukot mula sa lumang kahon. May nag-iwan ng envelope sa labas, pabulong ang sabi ni Unji. May selyo, parang deliberate. Ang pagpasok ng envelope sa kwento ay hindi isang random na aksyon. Ito ay isang kutsara na muntik na humila ng nakatagong mahalagahan. Ito ang unang bagay na malinaw na hindi karaniwan. Mayroong sino man na gustong i-destabilize ang gabi. At baka ang target ay hindi lang ang Park family. Baka ang target ay si Naomi din. Si Lorenzo ay nagpasiya. Hindi siya magpapadala ng show sa pananakot. Tumawag siya ng investigator. Isang lalaki mula sa kanyang legal staff na may reputasyon sa pagdiskredit ng peking ebidensya. May dalang forensic team na man-check ng material sa envelope at may inutusan din siyang dagdagang security patrol sa labas. Ang kanyang mga kilos ay mabilis at organisado, hindi dahil sa galit, kundi dahil sa pekeng reputasyon na dapat pag-ingatan. Ngunit, may isang elemento na hindi kayang ayusin ang pera at legal counsel, ang tahimik na pag-alala sa loob ni Naomi. Ang selyo ay hindi simpleng simbolo. Para sa kanya, ito ay tagapagpaalala ng isang kwento na siya ay iniiwasan. Isang panahon nang siya ay kinabahan at isang lihim na inilatag sa isang sobre at minabuti lamang na itago. Alam niya sa isang antas na nagmumula sa pagkakaalam ng sarili na kung ang selyong iyan ay may kaugnayan sa kanya, hindi ito mawawala ng basta. At mas masawal pa, may taong gustong gamitin iyon upang sugurin ng iba. Nagkaroon ng mabilisang pagpupulong sa backstage.
Si Lorenzo, si Lito at ang legal investigator ang naglatag ng mga immediate steps. I-isolate ang envelope, i-forensics ang wax, trace ang source ng Polaroid at mag-coordinate sa external legal counsel ng Park family. Hindi nila agad ibubunyag ang nilalaman sa publiko. Ang proseso ay disiplinado, hindi basta pag-uusapan sa bar. May lehitimong paraan para i-handle ang mga bagay na pwedeng magdulot ng skandalo. Si Naomi ay inayayahan sa sulok at tanungin ng direkta. May alam ka ba tungkol sa picture na yan? Mariin ang tanong, hindi ito panggarbel. Tumango siya, pero hindi nagbubunyag. No, mahinang sabi niya. Hindi ko alam kung saan ito nanggaling. Pero kung may kinalaman sa akin, alak ang dapat nating gawin ay mag-imbestiga, hindi agad magpanik, at hindi dapat naming hayaang masira ang gabi ng ibang tao hanggang hindi tayo sigurado. May respeto sa tingin ni Lorenzo. May mga sandaling ang kanyang mukha ay nagpapakita ng pagtitig na hindi lamang dahil siya ang employer, tila mukhang may tunay na pag-aalala. Ngunit ang kanyang kapangyarihan ay hindi mawawala, kaya naman ipinaubaya niya ang ibang mga parte ng operasyon kay Lito. Magkabalik tanaw si Naomi sa isang gabi at sa isang taong nag-iwan sa kanya ng selyong iyon sa kanyang nakalaang buhay. Hindi niya sasabihin kung sino iyon ngayon, hindi pa. Pero ang kanyang abilidad na magpanatili ng katahimikan para protektahan ng iba ang nagbunsod sa kanya upang tanggapin ang papel na dala niya sa sarili, protektahan ang bride at bantayan ang gabi.
Sa gitna ng rehearsal, may maliit na eksena. Minji at Naomi naglalakad sa aisle. Minji ay huminto at kumakapit sa dalawang daliri ni Naomi, hindi sa gabal, isang hiling ng tao na may takot. Huwag mo akong iiwan, bulong ni Minji. Hindi kita iiwan, sagot ni Naomi, at hindi ito anyo ng pick-up line o mababaw na pangako. Ito ay propesyonal na pangako na inihulma mula sa kanyang buong pagkatao. May mga tanong siya tungkol sa kung bakit siya nagmamalasakit, ang sagot ay simple, ang pagiging tao. Ngunit sa likod ng mga eksenang iyon, ang mga mata sa labas ng bodega ay naglilipon. May headlight ng isang white van na natisod sa gilid ng venue sa ilang ulit. May drone ng isang hobbyist na umiikot sa itaas na tila walang saysay hanggang sa malaman nilang may nakatalagang rhythm ang pag-ikot nito. Tumatagos sa malamlam na ilaw parang sinusukat ang perimeters. Lito ay nag-command, double perimeter, no one leaves without clearance, camera feed inside and out, drone countermeasures on standby. Habang ang mga aparatong pangsiguridad ay nagpapabilis ng kanilang trabaho, may lumitaw na bagong piraso ng puzzle. Isang anonymous tip na galing sa email ng event coordinator. May attachment, isang clip ng video, 3 segundo lamang, nagpapakita ng isang silweta ng babae na may hawak na sobre at nagiiwan sa isang dumpster. Walang mukha, ngunit may detalye ng bakuran ng venue na malinaw na kinikilala ng mga security feeds. Lito ay nag-command, double perimeter, no one leaves without clearance, camera feed inside and out, drone countermeasures on standby. Habang ang mga aparatong pangsiguridad ay nagpapabilis ng kanilang trabaho, may lumitaw na bagong piraso ng puzzle. Isang anonymous tip na galing sa email ng event coordinator. May attachment, isang clip ng video, 3 segundo lamang, nagpapakita ng isang silweta ng babae na may hawak na sobre at nagiiwan sa isang dumpster. Walang mukha, ngulit may detalye ng bakuran ng venue na malinaw na kinikilala ng security feeds.
Ang clip ay sapat na para magpataas ng antas ng alerta. Ang tensyon ay nagiikot sa espasyo, ang mga preparasyon ay nagiging militar, ang mga buke ay nagiging shields. Si Naomi ay nakaramdam ng kakaibang pagsasabog sa loob, hindi takot lamang, kundi galit. May taong nagtatangkang gambalayin ang kanyang buhay at posibleng ang buhay ng iba. At siya, na sinsadyang pumasok sa larong ito para kumita, ay napilitang pumili. Hihiwalay siya ba at iiwan ang posisyon para ingatan ng sarili o mananatili siyang nasa gitna ng panganib para protektahan ang iba? Sa isang sandaling puno ng pagtitimbang, lumapit si Lorenzo sa kanya. I want the envelope secured, maamo ang boses niya. No leaks, we run forensics. But Naomi, if anyone tries to use your past to threaten this family, I will not allow it. Hindi ito isang dalisay na pangakong pag-ibig. Ito ay pagmamay-ari ng isang taong may saloobin ng protector, isang mapangasiwang kind ng pag-aalaga na nanggagaling sa puwersa at hindi lamang sa emosyon. Sa loob ni Naomi, may papaloob na maliit na kilabot, hindi takot sa kanya per se, kundi sa ideya na ang isang tao ay may sapat na kapangyarihan para sabihin kung sino ang dapat protektahan at sino ang kung minsay itinatakda lamang. Kung titibayin natin ang mga hakbang, sagot ni Naomi, kailangan rin natin ng legal backup para sa bride at transparency kung sakaling may forced disclosure. Hindi natin dapat ipataw ang ating mga desisyon sa publiko nang walang ebidensya. Lumapit si Minji sa kanila at brazenly nagpasalamat sa paghawak sa kamay ni Naomi kahit na si Mrs. Park ay nakatingin ng mahigpit. May simpleng pagkakautang sa sulat ng dalaga, isang pasasalamat na higit pa sa pera. Thank you, mahinaon. I just want to feel safe. Sa interrupting rhythm na iyon, naglakad si Unji papanta kay Naomi at ibinigay ang isang bagay, isang piraso ng papel na mukhang torn from an old ledger. Found this near the dumpster, bulong niya. May marka, parang pareho sa selyo. Pinagmamasdan ng lahat. Ang maliit na papel ay may blotted ink at initials. Hindi ito kumpleto, hindi pa. Ngunit ito ay sapat para lumikha ng pangingilabot sa katahimikan. Ang plano ay nabuo. I-secure ang envelope, i-run ang forensics at itago muna ang detalye mula sa publiko habang nagpapatuloy ang rehearsal. May mga hakbang na hindi pa nila pipinturan sa mga official release, mga maliit na taktika at division ng protection.
Si Naomi ay inatasang manatiling malapit sa bride hindi lamang bilang assistant kundi bilang isang unsung guardian. Bago magtapos ang rehearsal, pumunta si Naomi sa labas para huminga. Nakatingin siya sa ilaw ng street lamp at sa anino nito ay may mabilis na pag-ikot. Ang puting van ay nagmaneho, tumigil at umatras ng 2 beses. Hindi siya sigurado kung nakita siyang lumabas. Alam lang niya na ang tao sa loob nito ay may balak. Sa loob ng kanyang bulsa, tumunog ang telepono, isang bagong message.
Muli, isang larawan, ang parehong selyo, at sa likod ng larawan may maliit na linya ng teksto. Not everything sleeps quietly. Si Naomi ay humawak ng mahigpit sa kanyang coat. Hindi niya alam kung sana siyang magalit o mapuyat. Ang kanyang tanong ay naging desisyon. Haharapin niya ba ang mananakot o aalisin niya ang sarili mula sa entablado? Ang ginawa niya ay hindi dramatiko. Kumuha siya ng isang malalim na paghinga, ibinalik ang telepono sa bulsa at pumasok muli sa rehearsal hall. Sa kanyang pagdiriwang ng katahimikan na pinili niyang panatilihin, may isang bagay na lumitaw sa kanyang isip. Ang envelope ay hindi lamang panganib para sa kanya. Maaari itong maging dahilan para masira ang gabi ng ibang tao, ang mga taong inaalagaan niya, at iyon ang hindi niya papayagan. Sa labas ng rehearsal hall, sa isang basurang gilid, napansin niya ang isang maliit na piraso ng papel na may partial watermark, parang identikado sa crest ng video at sa selyo. Hinawakan niya ito at ang contact ng kanyang mga daliri sa ticket-like na papel ay nagdala sa kanyang pabalik sa isang gabi ng kanyang kabataan. Isang fiesta, isang lumang bahay na puno ng mahahalagang mukha at isang pamamanihikan na hindi natuloy. Ang memorya ay hindi malinaw, ngunit sapat ito para iparamdam na ang selyo ay may kaugnayan sa isang tao mula sa kanyang nakaraan, isang tao na maaaring may ahenda laban sa kanya o laban sa pamilya na pinaghahandaan nila ngayon. Hindi pa tapos ang gabi. Ang rehearsal ay magtatapos, ngunit ang tensyon ay hindi mawawala. Si Naomi sa loob ng kanyang ulo ay naglatag ng plano ng kanyang sarili. Hindi siya aalis, hindi niya ipapadala ang babaeng inihabilin sa kanya sa panganib at hindi niya hahayaan ang mga nagtatangkang manakot ay magtagumpay ng walang kapalit. Bumalik sa loob ng venue, ang mga ilaw ay tila mas matingkad at sa gitna ng puting tela at bulaklak, ang alon ng mga posibilidad ay nakulong sa isang sobre. Sa loob ng bodega, naupo si Naomi sa isang lumang kahon, inaalis ang isang pirasong papel mula sa ibang sobre, isang clue na maaaring magbukas ng maraming tanong. Ang kanyang mga kamay ay matatag, ngulit ang puso niya ay mabilis. Alam niya na sa ilang araw, ang lahat ng kanilang pag-iingat ay sasailalim sa isang malaking pagsubok at siya ang nasa paninindigan. Ang papel sa kamay ni Naomi ang naging simula ng isang serye ng paggalaw na hindi na lang basta trabaho. Ito ay taktika, dugo ng stratehiya. Hindi siya nagkulang ng pansin. Hinanap niya ang mga detalye sa mismong texture ng papel, ang marka ng watermark, ang maliit na puting fibrous edge na tanda ng isang lumang press, ang paraan ng pagtupi na parang tinahi na may patak ng pawis. Ipinasa niya ito kay Lito at hindi nagbukas ng boses. Mas malakas kaysa sa anumang takot ang kanyang determinasyon. Sa loob ng oras, ang envelope ay nasa isang sterile na tray at dinala sa isang maliit na laboratory room na inayos ni Lorenzo para sa forensics. Hindi ito eksaherasyon. Mayroong mga taong nakadress ng disposable gloves at mga tagpo ng lampara na tumututok sa kakaibang seal na pula. Ang seal yung paulit-ulit na nakatanim sa mga panaginip ni Naomi. Ngunit, sa ilalim ng microscope, ang seal ay malinaw na hindi totoong heraldic stamp, kundi replica, isang modernong pigmented wax na ginagamit ng isang 3D printed mold. Ang tinta sa piraso ng papel ay may halong chemical signature na nakalink sa isang paper mill na dating nagsusupply sa mga boutique stationery houses. Hindi lokal na crest, kundi isang manufactured glue na idisenyo para magmukhang antigong piraso. In other words, sinabi ng isang babae sa forensics, si Julia, isang forensic document analyst na inihire ni Lorenzo, sinubukan nilang gawing authentic ang bagay, pero may fingerprint ng modern manufacturing. Hindi ito lumabas galing sa old family archive, ginawa ito para magmukhang ganon.
May pag-iling si Naomi, isang halo ng kaginhawaan at dahan-dahang galit. Kung ang envelope ay isang pagpapanggap, ibig sabihin mayroong taong may interes sa pag-construct ng narrative, hindi basta paghahamak ng isang lumang alaala. May intensyon at may pondo. At kung may pondo, malamang may sinuman sa likod na may corporate interest o personal agenda na gustong sirain ang reputasyon ng Park family o gamitin ang takot ni Naomi bilang instrumento. Habang tumatakbo ang forensics at ang legal team ni Lorenzo ay nagsimulang maglatag ng mga contingencies. Si Naomi ay tinawag ng Mrs. Park sa isang maliit na sealed living room. Tahimik ang espasyo, puno ng malambot na ilaw at isang tea set. Sa harap niya, ang matriarch ay maingat na naglalagay ng 2 tasa sa ibabaw ng salot at tinignan siya ng may kakaibang mixture ng kuryosidad at pag-aalala. Miss Haze, unti-unting sabi ni Mrs. Park, hindi ko maintindihan ang mga bagay na mayroon tayo, pero nakikita ko ang ginagawa mo. At nakikita ko kung sino ang nagpapakilos para protektahan ang seremonya. Hindi ako magtatanong ng higit pa, hindi ko karapat-dapat. Ngunit kailangan kong malaman na ikaw ay hindi kailangan panindigan ang sarili mong buhay ng mag-isa. Naomi felt the weight of the words. Ang relasyong iyon, hindi pagiging boss at empleyado, ngunit pagkilala ng isang babae sa may kapangyarihan sa isa ring taong tahimik na rumerepresenta ng katatagan. Hindi ko kayo pababayaan, sagot niya ng direkta. Hindi ko hahayaan na masira ang gabi ninyo dahil sa isang piraso ng papel. Ngunit kailangan nating magplano at kailangan kong may katiyakan sa legal na aspeto para sa sarili ko. Mrs. Park briefly inhaled then nodded. Gawin natin kung ano ang dapat gawin, basta't ang aking pamilya ay ligtas. Paglabas ni Naomi, naglakad siya pabalik sa ops room kung saan ang mga screen ay nagpapakita ng mga CCTV feeds, ang mga mapa ng venue at isang stack ng mga mugshot-style photographers na ipinapakita ang mga lumang empleyado ng catering firms at mga external suppliers. Dito, si Lorenzo ay nakaupo sa gitna, may hawak na black coffee at ang mga mata niya ay hindi mawala sa isang screen, hindi lang dahil siya ang boss. May bagong intensyon ang kanyang tingin, isang panimulang piraso ng plano. I propose something extreme, nagsabi si Lorenzo nang hindi agad tumingin kay Naomi. Not violent, not dishonest, strategic. Naomi steadied herself. What is it? We create legal armor, ani Lorenzo. If the intent is to use you as a liability to damage the Park family, then we remove that liability. We reframe the legal exposure and control the narrative before they can weaponize it. I don't understand, sagot ni Naomi. How does that work without making me a pawn? We make it consensual, transparent. You agree to something that makes it harder for them to use you, and in exchange, we secure you. A civil union, signed with witnesses, recorded, something that changes the optics and gives you legal cover while we continue to dismantle the forgery. Think of it as a temporary legal shield. I will sign the papers as your husband for the night. We register it officially. The public will see a lawful step. No scandal about unmarried associations, no implication of impropriety between the bride and a staff member. It removes the center of their leverage. The words hung. It was bold. It was strange. It carried echoes of a trope Naomi had always avoided, the rich man sweeping in to solve a problem with his name. But Lorenzo's proposal was not a romantic swoop. It was a tactical suggestion. He emphasized legal counsel involvement, transparency, and her right to end the arrangement after the threat was neutralized. It was presented as service, not ownership. Naomi felt every muscle weighing pros and cons. Ang likas niyang instinct ay magtakbo, lumayo sa entablado kung kailan lang may panganib. Sa kabilang banda, lumitaw sa isipan niya ang maliit na mukha ni Minji, ang bahagyang panginginig sa boses noong humingi ng proteksyon. Kung may paraan na magproprotekta sa bride at sabay na poprotektahan ang sarili niya sa paraang legal at hindi ginagawang kasangkapan, hindi ba iyon katanggap-tanggap? Which means you are asking me to marry you, sagot niya, mahina. I am asking for consent to a legal union for the purpose of protection, tugon ni Lorenzo, mabilis at malinaw. You have my word that it will be handled properly. You can refuse. There are other options. We can engage external shelters, relocate you, create a decoy. But those are temporary and messy. This is controlled, legal, public. Naomi smelled the coffee again, strong, dark, grounding. She thought of the envelope, the way the paper had cut through propriety and into memory. She thought of the van headlights and the drone spinning like a small sun above the venue. She thought of Minji's small hand in rehearsal, her whisper, "Huwag mo akong iiwan." "Give me time," she said finally. "If I agree, everything must be spelled out. No surprises, legal counsel present."
All points led to an ambiguous trail, someone with enough resources to fabricate a narrative, but not enough to cover all traces. At 8 p.m., the guests began to arrive. There was an air of taut control under the chandeliers. Minji glowed in an understated garment, not heavy lace, but a soft silk that fluttered with each step, and Naomi stationed herself nearby. Guests laughed softly, masks of normalcy over nervous pulses. Mrs. Park moved among them with calm authority, orchestrating the crowd like a commander. In the crowd, Lorenzo remained a shadowed figure, sometimes visible, sometimes not, ever watchful. Midway through the reception, an alarm rigged to a side corridor flashed on a small screen. A white van had parked further than planned at the rear alley, engine off. A figure had been seen lingering, then approaching the surface entrance. In seconds, Lito's team intercepted him. They brought him in, handcuffed, subdued, and in the harsh light he was not the faceless man in a van, but a younger, trembling person who kept saying, "I was told, I was paid." Under pressure and the promise of leniency, he answered. He had been paid by a man named Cho, linked to a failing PR firm that had a history of manufacturing scandals for corporate clients. Cho's motive was revenge and leverage. If he could manufacture scandal, he could blackmail the Park family into signing a concession contract on a development plan. The van was searched. Inside were fake press badges, a bag of outdated stationery, and a drone that looked like a consumer toy but rigged to hover close and drop a flash drive into a plant pot. The drive, when intercepted and opened in the secure room, contained low-resolution images and a short set of audio clips that were clearly staged. The forensics team smiled thinly. The audio had been time-stamped, but the metadata was scrubbed. However, the manner of planting and the crude manufacturing suggested desperation more than skilled professionalism. Cho, the unofficial mastermind, was not present, but the van man's statements revealed a ring, a cluster of small-time operators playing at corporate espionage, hired by a rival firm to ruin the Park family's image and pull a business advantage. The ring included one name that struck Naomi cold, a social name from her own memories, a connection she preferred to keep sleeping. The exposure of the van incident felt like a temporary victory. The immediate threat had been neutralized, and the guests were gently informed of a minor security incident that had been contained. No specifics were shared. The dance went on. But the secret at the center of Naomi's chest remained. The envelope, the cello, the man from her past. That night, after the official end of the reception, a smaller crowd remained at the venue, the newlyweds' select circle. Conversations bubbled in low tones. Naomi found herself beside Lorenzo at the edge of the empty dance floor, the glitter of candles reflecting on his cufflinks. She had spent the day moving between roles, guardian, assistant, wife on paper, and the exhaustion now settled like a weight that made her voice small. "Did you ever imagine you'd be here like this?" she asked, voicing nothing rigorous, but searching for a reference point. Lorenzo looked at her, briefly amused.
I imagined many things, he said, not all of them accurate. He paused. You made a choice today. You could have walked away. For what? Leaving them exposed? She let the words out, more to herself than him. Even if I walked away, someone would use this. Someone would find another lever. You are not just a lever, he said softly. You are a person I respect. Naomi blinked. The phrase landed oddly, like a coin of warmth dropped into a chilly lake. The edges of it rippled through the tiredness. You said you'd not coerce me, she said, testing the boundary. I did, he replied, and I won't. I only said what I could offer. The rest is your decision. But thank you. For a moment, the air between them was ordinary, the kind of silence that happens when two people who have only known each other through contracts and strategy find a brief sliver of human terrain. Naomi turned and walked away, toward the service corridor, toward the quiet where she could breathe. She found Unji by the back door, fiddling with a small camera he'd stashed. His expression was guarded but eager. I checked the dumpster route again, he said. There was a man who knows the route, but he used to work at a social club near Naomi's old neighborhood. I ran his name through the system. He's gone through several petty offenses, but nothing that ties him to this. Unji handed Naomi a small scrap, a receipt for a courier service, the handwriting a hurried scrawl that mentioned Cho in the corner. Naomi's stomach twisted. Cho. She had glimpsed Cho's name in her past in a way that made her head swim. The maintenance of favors, a crooked network that existed at the blurry edges of older neighborhoods and social clubs. She remembered the echo of a promise one night long ago, an offer that had been transactional in a landscape where survival required favors. Naomi sat on a crate and, for the first time since the offer, allowed herself to feel more than strategy. The years had taught her to box pain and put it on a shelf, but sometimes those shelves sagged. She thought of the young Naomi at a party, a false handshake, a whisper used as currency, and she thought of now, paper-clipped into a life that could be better than the bargain her younger self might have had to make. At 2 a.m., the guests had dwindled to a handful of trusted faces. Lorenzo knocked on the door of Naomi's temporary dressing room and entered with quiet. The room smelled of lavender and the faint metallic tang of the makeup remover she always used after long events. He carried 2 glasses of warm tea. "Too much coffee all day?" he asked. She accepted the cup, the warmth blooming in her palms.
They sat on opposite sides of a small table under a single lamp. Outside, the city was a softened blur. "I want to thank you for tonight," Naomi said, and the words were simple, not smoothed with legal polish, "for taking this seriously." "You did the right thing," he said. "Not everyone would have done what you did for Minji. For me, it was necessary." "Is it?" she asked, head tilted. "Or is it your way of solving a problem with your name?" He smiled, the kind that did not reach all the way to his eyes but softened them. "Maybe both, but regardless, you agreed to it because it was the right move for this family. That means more than any contract." Naomi looked down. For a while she said nothing. Then she took a breath and spoke with a voice that was measured and small, a confession without theatricality. I never, well, not in a way that many would expect. She paused, searching for the correct framing. "I am a virgin." The silence that followed was not awkward because it was salacious. It was quiet because it was true and had weight. Naomi's cheeks flushed a delicate dark rose. She had not shared that fact to seduce or shock anyone. She said it because the day had removed layers and she wanted to be honest in the one place where she could be herself.
Lorenzo's first expression was surprise, not of mockery or lust, but of genuine, unpracticed curiosity. Then that surprise softened to something like reverence. He set down his cup carefully as if he had touched porcelain. He did not make a joke or a move. He listened. "Thank you for telling me," he said at last. "I wasn't expecting that, but I am glad you trusted me." "I didn't tell you to get that reaction," Naomi said, a small smile curved at her lips. The room felt safer because there was no predatory edge, no sense of transaction after the confession. It was an intimate piece of information, and the way Lorenzo received it, slowly, respectfully, mattered. "Then I will not violate that trust," he answered. "You have my patience and my discretion. And if it matters, we can decide what happens next together. No rashness." The word "together" landed differently. For the first time, Naomi considered not only the legal scaffolding of the night, but the fragile possibility of mutual navigation. She had not asked for romance, she had not sought rescue, but in the dark, with the hum of the empty venue all around them, it felt acceptable, even human, to accept kindness. They kissed, careful, consensual, a soft meeting of mouths that was less a commination than a quiet acknowledgement. There was no haste, no expectation. Naomi felt Lorenzo's hand at the small of her back, but not pressing, and she felt, with a sharp, surprising clarity, that she could step back if she wanted to. Consent was a living thing between them, stated and restated with each small movement. Afterward, they spoke for hours like people who were building a bridge out of cautious stones.
They discussed the immediate plan. Lorenzo's legal teams already had a strategy to expose the falsified documents publicly and attribute them to the ring behind Cho. They would work with local law enforcement to pursue the chain of payments and the courier route. The Park family legal representatives would file an injunction if any media tried to publish the content. Unji and Lito would cooperate in identifying and surveilling trace patterns. Naomi would remain in the venue in a safe room under watch until the case barreled through the first layer of legal closure. When Naomi finally lay down, she felt a fatigue that was not just physical, but deep to the marrow. Sleep came like a bargain. The morning brought a renewed intensity. The legal team had unearthed a payment transfer, small enough to be plausible but traceable when connected to a chain. A set of anonymous wire transfers that moved through a laundering route tied to a small PR firm that had worked with companies trying to acquire park properties years ago. The trail led to a mid-level executive named Park Sangjin, an unlikely but real name that had been previously involved in a hostile takeover bid. He was now on record as denying involvement, but phone records were more stubborn than denials. The net was narrowing. At noon, Naomi was called to a meeting with Mrs. Park, Minji, Lorenzo, and the Park family lawyer. The room was calm save for an undercurrent of nerves. Mrs. Park's voice was quiet. "We have to make some choices about disclosure," she said. "If this escalates publicly, the consequences for business deals could be large." Lorenzo leaned forward. "We need a controlled disclosure. If Cho's ring is trying to force them into a contract, we can expose it in a way that makes them appear as the victim. If possible, we attribute the leak to corporate sabotage." Minji, looking at Naomi, said, "I don't want my family to suffer, but I don't want your life to be ruined because of protecting us." Naomi met Minji's gaze. There was a small moment of truth. The two women, one bound by status, the other once marginal but now legally married by contract to an Italian impresario, standing across from each other in a quiet alignment. Naomi placed a hand gently over Minji's. "We'll do it the right way. Legal steps first, public only when we have to, and I will stand down if you want me to." Minji's eyes shone. "I want you to stay, to be safe." The plan moved into action.
Lorenzo's team leaked a controlled statement to a trusted journalist emphasizing the aggressive tactics of corporate saboteurs targeting prominent families for financial gains. The statement reframed the narrative away from a personal scandal to a calculated attempt of extortion. The journalist, well vetted, published a nuanced piece with corroboration from Lorenzo's forensics and the Park family's own legal counsel. Several other outlets picked up the thread of suspected corporate foul play rather than salacious gossip.
The effect was subtle but crucial. It diffused the prurient curiosity and forced the conversation into a legal and business sphere, where evidence and process mattered. Meanwhile, the investigators tracked down Cho through the courier receipt Naomi had found with Unji's help. Cho was in a dry basement office 2 cities away, a nervous man with connections but no high-level protection. When they confronted him, he admitted hiring freelancers to plant documents and intimidate. He named a middleman who had been paid a sum of cash and handed a list of targets. The middleman, under pressure, implicated a regional PR consultant who had prior ties with a corporate client eager to buy Park properties at a discount. The trail of evidence was not conclusive enough to charge a major corporation, but it was enough to show that the leak was a manufactured attempt at leverage, a revelation that mattered. Publicly, the Park wedding became, for a short time, a story of a family weathering corporate underhandedness with dignity. The scandal never materialized. The forensics lab's report, released to the press as evidence of tampering, along with the detained man from the van and the exposed courier trail, shifted the energy out of voyeurism and into accountability. For Naomi, the unspooling of the plot was not only a professional victory, it was personal liberation. The envelope that had haunted her came to represent not a chain, but a key, evidence that, once analyzed and placed in context, unlocked a part of the past she had been trying to keep shut. The trace that led to Cho also revealed a name from her younger days, an acquaintance called Jae-hyun, a collaborator from a social club whose name appeared in the middleman's ledger as someone who'd once done favors for favor currency. He had been peddling small scandals for years, and now he was a node in a network that had finally overreached. When investigators brought Jae-hyun in for questioning, Naomi watched his face. Older, a little desperate, the bravado gone. He stared at her as if expecting anger. She had none to give him that day. She had used the energy for better ends. The man had been a factor in a night she'd rather forget, but now he was simply a link in the chain, a source of evidence that would strengthen the legal case against Cho's ring. In an interview, he mentioned how easy it was to find people willing to be instruments when money was offered, how someone like Cho provided scripts and motives that made otherwise harmless photos dangerous. The confession was not theatrical, it was practical, bureaucratic. Minji's wedding night was quiet, given the circumstances. The newlywed couple, hers in her light robe and his in a hotel suite where Lorenzo had prepared for her guests, sat together in the small hours, holding hands and speaking softly about trivialities. Naomi had her own small rest in an adjoining suite, not as a bride but as a new legal spouse in name only. Ang protocol was complicated. The Park family insisted on preserving Minji's space and dignity, and Naomi honored that. There was an unspoken agreement. The legal union would classify Naomi as protected in a way that made her less susceptible to attacks that were sexualized or scandalized. As the night settled, Lorenzo found Naomi at a balcony, wrapped in a shawl, watching the city. The sky was a black sea with a few low clouds. He stood silent for a moment, then asked, "Do you regret tonight?" Naomi's breath came in a slow exhale. "No, I regret the things that forced me to choose extremes, but I don't regret standing up for Minji or for myself. This was not simple, and I don't pretend it left me untouched. But I think," she closed her eyes and let the word out, "I think it bought me time."
That was the intention, he said. Time, not ownership. She turned to him. And what will happen after the case? She asked. Lorenzo considered that, the city reflected in his pupils like scattered coins. We will finish the investigation. We will ensure the evidence points to the ring. Then we will open the option to annul or maintain the legal status, whatever you choose. I will not force you to continue living under a name you don't want. That is the condition. The earnestness in his voice was steadying. Naomi wanted, for a fraction of a second, to believe that things could be simple, that choices made under pressure could unpick into ordinary life afterward. But she knew better. Every decision leaves a seam. In the days that followed, the tale of the scandal gradually disappeared into court filings and legal jargon. Cho's ring was partially exposed, a few members were arrested, some took plea bargains, others fled. The PR consultant who had taken money to facilitate the operation was publicly shamed and lost clients. The Park family consolidated their legal case and emerged with their reputation largely intact. The press turned elsewhere. Human attention is fickle, and stories die when there are no bodies to feed them. Naomi resumed her function at the venue, moving through the rooms with the same precise motions that had made her indispensable. The contract marriage was visible on paper and in name, but in practice, she continued to work, to manage, to protect. People treated her differently now, some with greater respect, some with whispers of curiosity, but most were simply relieved that the wedding had not become a circus. Her relationship with Lorenzo evolved not in sweeping gestures, but through small interventions. A message now and then checking if she had eaten, a discreet text about security updates, a quiet presence at the periphery of her life that was not oppressive but attentive. They did not leap into a romance scripted by neat arcs. They moved with the carefulness of two adults aware of the asymmetry between them and determined to avoid abusing it. One evening, months later, Naomi found herself in a quiet cafe an hour's walk from the venue, sipping plain coffee, and Lorenzo sat across from her with a manila envelope. Inside it were the final forensic reports and a small packet of numbers, evidence compiled and cleaned. He slid it across with an expression that mixed relief and fatigue. The legal team says we have enough to file for a formal complaint against Cho and the named collaborators, he said. Not a full corporate conviction, but enough to make them liable and to recover damages. We can also file to remove any circulated materials from public servers. The Park family wants to push forward with the redevelopment project now that the shadow is lifting. Naomi nodded, feeling the last of the pressure dissipate in a way that felt almost physical. She had been part of the plan from the start, not a prop, but an operator. The knowledge of her role, the choices she had made, gave her a quiet, private empowerment. She had been willing to accept a legal arrangement to shield others, and ended up protecting herself. Outside, the light was soft with a late afternoon calm. Lorenzo looked at her and said, "You know, when I first met you, I expected someone who would be efficient and invisible. You were efficient, impeccably so, but you're not invisible." Her laugh was small. "Invisible people get to watch. That's how I learned to read a room." He smiled. "Good, because now I want to make sure you are seen in the way you choose to be seen." They spent the rest of the afternoon talking about smaller things, the menu for a charity event Naomi wanted to run, a potential overseas opportunity for Minji's family that Naomi might coordinate, plans for a security review for other events. They were partners in a sense that did not require romance yet. Then came the question of what their legal marriage would mean in the long term. Naomi had been clear from the start. This was her choice for protection, not for a lifetime of obligations. The contract included a clause allowing for termination with agreed terms. Over the next months, they navigated the dissolution of the legal union with the same meticulousness they had used to create it, ensuring Naomi retained her financial independence and privacy. The dissolution was a formal, civil matter, and once completed, Naomi found herself legally single again. The public barely noticed. The record remained an obscure line in legal filings. Yet the emotional strand between Naomi and Lorenzo remained. It had shifted from a transaction to a relationship of mutual respect, edged with unresolved possibilities. They met over dinners, sometimes to plan events, sometimes to talk about what it meant to rebuild trust after power imbalances. Naomi insisted on boundaries. Lorenzo accepted them, sometimes with visible effort. One late night, after another event that had passed without incident, the two found themselves walking along the riverfront.
Lorenzo appeared at her elbow, not by arrangement, but as company. He said nothing. They watched as a drone of municipal inspection hummed lazily overhead, harmless now, a tool of the city rather than a threat. "Do you ever regret any of it?" he asked softly. Naomi looked at him for a long time. "Regret is for the things I didn't have the courage to face," she said. "I don't regret choosing to stand. Maybe I regret not telling myself sooner that I could." He smiled, the expression real this time. "Maybe none of us tell ourselves soon enough." They lingered in the dark, two figures who had navigated danger and negotiated dignity. The future lay uncharted, legal obligations settled, relationships unresolved, potential futures branching. The envelope's threat had been neutralized, but the memory of it remained, always a reminder that agency often looks like a contract, a negotiation, a choice made under pressure and honored afterward. Naomi had been asked to marry for protection. She had said yes because it served a purpose she believed in. The wedding night confession, her quiet truth, had not been exploited but honored. The result was not a fairy tale. It was a recalibration of power, a slow reweaving of trust. In the end, she reclaimed the narrative of her life, not by being rescued, but by choosing the terms of her rescue and then deciding what to keep. The city moved around them, indifferent and steady. Naomi folded her hands and let the night settle. She had been fragile in the way all human beings are, and she had been strong in the choices she made. That simultaneity, she had learned, was not contradictory, it was whole. If anyone asked her which moment had changed everything, she would have said it was the instant she decided not to let fear dictate her story. The rest had been work, legal, emotional, procedural. It had been messy and slow and utterly human. And in that truth, there was a kind of peace. Kung gusto ninyong sundan ang susunod na kabanata, kung paano nilang harapin ang mga bagong hamon at kung ano ang mangyayari sa pagitan ni Naomi at Lorenzo, huwag kalimutang mag-subscribe at i-click ang susunod na bahagi. May mga lihim pa ring nakaantabay at ang kwento nila ay hindi pa tapos.